Dobry wieczór, bardzo dziękuję Wam za liczne przybycie. Duże podziękowania również dla ING Banku Śląskiego za udostępnienie tej wyjątkowej przestrzeni. Wracamy tutaj po 5 latach przerwy. Z tego co widzę, to są na sali osoby, które pamiętają, jak wykłady z cyklu Mistrzowie Architektury odbywały się tutaj dawniej. Jakiś czas temu, jak wiecie, zmieniły się władze naszego katowickiego oddziału SARP-u i jest z nami dzisiaj nowy prezes, architekt Mikołaj Machulik, i chciałbym teraz poprosić go o kilka słów wstępu.
Dzień dobry, witam Was wszystkich, a szczególnie miło witam naszego gościa Andy Bow z Foster & Partners. Jak już Wojtek powiedział, spotykamy się tutaj po kilku latach przerwy. Wracamy do współpracy z ING. ING zawsze było mecenasem dobrej architektury. Ten obiekt, dla przypomnienia, dla młodszych, wyszedł kiedyś spod ręki znakomitego też dużego biura Corker Marshall z Australii, a współudział tutaj w doposażaniu wnętrz mają nasi koledzy z Meduza Group i Małeccy. Także 15 lat temu, jak zaczynaliśmy Mistrzów Architektury, zaczynaliśmy właśnie tutaj. Więc jeszcze raz serdecznie witam i zapraszam, a nazwisko Foster & Partners to jest architektura najwyższych lotów, jak wiemy. W moich czasach, jak ja byłem studentem, to jeżdżąc za granicę, wytyczaliśmy sobie trasy naszych podróży właśnie między innymi obiektami Sir Normana Fostera. Kiedyś była to niedostępna architektura, dzisiaj ta dostępność jest bardzo powszechna już. Architektura dalej najwyższych lotów, ale o tym opowie nam Andy Bow, który też, jak wiem, już pokaże może parę polskich projektów.
Thank you for being with us today. Today we are hosting Andy Bow, who is a senior partner and deputy head of studio at Foster & Partners. It's difficult to introduce our today's guest because you already know nearly everything about Foster & Partners. What I may say is that Foster & Partners is not a work of one person. It's always a teamwork of hundreds or even thousands of people, because all the realizations are an effect of collaboration of client, of engineers, of architects, and many, many people. So I think that our guest lecturer will tell you much more about it. So please welcome and give him a big amount of applause, Dr. Andy Bow.
While we're hooking up, I'd like to say hi there. I'm very, very happy to be here. I first came to Poland in 1986. I was 25 and I had no money. And Poland has changed quite a lot, I could say, since 1986. The people that I met had very little money, but they were very generous and they looked after me. I'd won a prize as a student, and I traveled to Krakow, Warsaw, Sopot, Gdynia, Gdansk when I was 25. And I fell in love with Poland, and I've been many times. I've been to Wrocław 3 times in 2018, where we're building the facade of the Battersea power station building I'm going to show. And we have 26 Polish architects in our office. They're all amazing. And if they're watching any of this, you know I love you, don't you? And I love somebody else as well. I like to dedicate lectures, and I like to dedicate this lecture to somebody. I have to find my phone. So I there's different ways that you can measure architecture. You can measure square feet, square meters, the financial success of projects. But in the end, the greatest measurement of architecture is really happiness. Are people really happy in the buildings that you create? And I hope this guy will be happy. This is my new grandson. I'm getting choky now. He's 9 days old. I became a grandson. Yeah, I became a grandfather 9 days old. I am choky, listen to this. So, and as you can maybe see, his name is Robin. You can maybe see there, he's wearing a little Robin outfit there. So this one is for Robin Hooper Bob. But that's enough about me, and thank you for explaining. For me, I'm here, I'm a member of Foster & Partners. On May the 1st, I'll have been there 23 years. And I'm very proud to represent hundreds and hundreds of people in our office to talk about the work that we're doing. Okay, last thing. When I came in 1988, and I was in Krakow, I was 25 years of age, and I remember being told that there was a factory in the Czech Republic, and there were fumes coming from it because the prevailing winds were coming in the direction of the historic city, and it was damaging the buildings. And it made me think about sustainability, it made me think about the connectivity of other countries. So, I'm now 58. So 33 years ago, I was starting to think about these important subjects, and I thought it would be nice to do a lecture about that. But first of all, what architects normally do is we normally talk about buildings, and I thought I'd just start showing you some buildings. The music that you're going to hear has been made by people in our office. The videos that you see have been made by people in our office. Again, all about the teamwork. So here we go. Here's some Foster & Partners buildings. And some words from Norman Foster. So in our office, there's no rule book that says how you do a foster partners building. We try never to do the same things twice. I think there's a love of clear expression of structure, a love of natural light, a love of sustainability. And we kind of design most things now. You saw some boats there, and we design furniture and lamps. And to echo Norman's words, we believe that good design can make a difference. And I think because I was thinking about my first visit to Poland and the story I told, and my grandson and his future, I thought I'd talk about infrastructure and the difference that we can make. Infrastructure means many different things. It's the space between buildings, but it's also about how we move around the world, and it's definitely about sustainability and green infrastructure. So that's the subject of my talk, and this is why. So I was born on the 20th of February 1961 at a time where there was about 3 billion people on the planet. If I live to be 80, there will be 9 billion people on the planet. I'm getting old, I'm not that old. There's 3 times as many people on the planet than when I was born. And what will it be like when my grandson is my age? So that's a big subject, and we believe that architects can really make a difference. And when you design, I mean, we are a global practice, we have 20 offices around the world. We start with this. So if you look at the planet, you can see, you're in the middle of Central Europe, you get very cold winters, it gets quite hot in the summer. In the Northern Hemisphere, you can see it's cold. And then there's, of course, a very hot bit in the middle. So there's places like the Middle East where it's very hot and it's very dry and it's very humid. And then when you go around to Malaysia and Singapore, you have a different problem. You have heat and you have humidity. And then, if you go to the very far north to Moscow and to Siberia, different things again. What that map doesn't show is earthquakes, typhoons, cyclones, and all the other things that you have to deal with. So I'm going to talk about how we deal with some of those things, and I'm going to start with heat. So this is a master plan that we did about 10-15 years ago. This is Masdar. So this is where we're designing in the desert in Abu Dhabi, and we look at the historic street patterns, and basically you're designing the architecture of shade. It's kind of obvious, but you're designing the architecture of shade. And in Masdar, the whole idea is that people can move underneath because you have very tight streets, and you can move around in electric vehicles. We did that 15, 20 years ago, maybe, 15 years ago. Electric cars. Electric cars aren't the future. In our office, they're already the past, but they're definitely the present. And the interesting thing is when you have electric cars, no more noise pollution, no more air pollution. You can open windows. You don't have to spend 25% of the brief doing mechanical and electrical engineering if the climate is right. If you're in one of those places where you have a nice car. So I'm talking about heat, and this is the architecture of shade. And this was a building that was originally designed for Milan, and then it was moved to Abu Dhabi, and it was for the Milan Expo. But again, it was designed, these beautiful curves were designed to create shade for people who were waiting. The subject of heat again, this is a man in Jordan, this is the airport, a bit like our Stansted airport. But here, because the sun is very hot, a series of kind of concrete palm trees, so that when you arrived, you felt you were in the Middle East. But basically, it's creating shade, the architecture of shade. So what happens if you're somewhere like Singapore? So this is a project we did called Beach Road. And here the computer was telling us how to encourage in the wind. You need air movement, you see it happening here. And there are a series of solid shades on the top. And you need, the sun is absolutely baking, and if you get it right, the wind will come in. And what we always do is we go back and test. So our project at the top was compared against a space that everyone likes in Singapore called Clark's Quay. This has a membrane roof, and our roof had 73% less solar radiation, and, and on a day when it was about 32 degrees centigrade outside, the felt temperature in Clark's Quay was 41, and the felt temperature in our project was 28. And then happy people. You know, we were asked to design a kind of American-style shopping mall, but actually part of the joy of being in the tropics is being on a Friday night, having a beer in your shirt sleeves and feeling comfortable, if you can manage it. And then these ideas carry forward in our practice. This is in India, this is in Amravati. It's a new government complex, and there's a new law courts. And the brief for the law courts is lots of space where solicitors and clients would meet before they go into the courtrooms. Same ideas again, big solid blades on the top, and then encouraging breezeways. At the centre, there's this incredible new government building in the middle, and so the water, you know, water is an unbelievably precious commodity, as we all know. But I would argue in India particularly so. So here we're dealing with the architecture of the monsoon, when the rain is incredible. So we gather the water and we use it to recycle, and then we draw air up through the building. I think you can almost form an argument that some of the greatest civilizations on earth emerged around the Mediterranean. So the Greeks, the Romans, the Mycenaeans, the Egyptians. Because it's the closest you can get to the perfect climate on Earth, maybe. That's my theory. It's not necessarily a theory that the office holds, I don't know. And here, this is a project in Marseille. So it's on the Mediterranean. And we were asked to transform the old port as Marseille became the European city of culture. And you can see this is what it used to be like. So you can see the cars are like a wound. They're cutting people off from the harbour. And what we did was we did this. We created a lot more public space. We made it easier for people to come down to the harbour to reconnect with their lifeblood, the harbour. Because people were kind of not important. And parents with buggies were not important. You know, the car had become so important, there wasn't enough space for people. And the people who had the yachts had started to inhabit the walking space. And so as a result, people really did go down there. We built this canopy as a celebration of the rights of the south of France. And they wanted something to become a focal point for the new harbour. So the water's in the sky. You know your project is a success if buskers go there. You know, if people with guitars go down there, they only go where there are people. You can see people are upside down. You can see that the sun is setting, it's hitting off the buildings. And the canopy has no artificial light. It's only the light of the south of France that does it during the day and at night. So, as I said at the beginning, people weren't going down to the harbour, and we transformed it, and the people came. And you know, I think, how do you measure success? I've been in architects' offices for 41 years, and you know, winning prizes is nice, and winning competitions is nice. Terrible when you lose, great if you win. But actually, this is what it's all about. It's about people, and it's about people being happy in the places and the buildings that you create. This is a children's hospital in Iowa, in America. So this is us dealing with the infrastructure of an existing hospital. And the team that was working on this decided to place the children's hospital next to the stadium, because when they were listening to the nurses, the doctors, and all the staff and the patients, they found out that everybody really loved the ball game. College football in America is massive. It's crowds like the English Premier League, 50, 60,000 sometimes. And so the idea was to lift all of the children's rooms up into the air and then design it so they could push beds into the windows so everyone could watch the ball game and just look what happened. I'm going to describe a project that is now in the northern part of the world. This is Stockholm, and I can remember going to the historic area of Stockholm, the old city, about 22 years ago. And I remember as I walked close, I had lots of cars, and I wasn't aware of this area, but this is a place called Slussen. And there's not a lot of cars in that, 'cause it's an old photograph, but this was often dominated by cars. It was when architects and engineers fell in love with the car, and it kind of smashed the city to bits. So we're in the process of repairing it. And so here, you know, we have bus lanes and car lanes, but it's a pedestrian-dominated place. You know, also one of the great things when you're in Paris is you can get right down beside the River Seine. You know, the next time you're in Paris, go right down by the water. So here you can do the same thing. But that's also a piece of infrastructure. It's flood protection when the snow melts in Sweden. A problem they don't have in Abu Dhabi, or a problem they do have in Sweden. And in Sweden and in Scandinavia, as soon as the sun shines, everybody wants to be outside. Everybody needs to feel the sun again. So the project we're doing is a series of step terraces that cascade down to the water. And it's all underway. And this is a little bit about mobility. So, you know, we all know about cycle lanes, and we all know about safe pedestrian areas. But now we have to deal with things like segways, electric scooters, how we can cater for them in the cities. And what the client asked us to do was also build a series of temporary terraces, so everyone could get used to the idea that there would be this project that would reinvent their city. And it was a lovely success. There's some happy people. Happy people kiss. Maybe you know your project's a success if people kiss. And also in Stockholm, buried into the hillside, we're building a new coach station, we're connecting to the new metro station, and finding new ways to look at the city. And of course, Sweden gets very cold in the winter, and so you can look from the inside out. So just to give you a little kind of snapshot of what that project will be like when it's finished. This is another cold place. This is Chicago. This is an Apple store that we've done. We've built many Apple stores around the world, but this one I think is really nice. Because I remember this space. It's in front of the Chicago Tribune building, and nobody really went down here, so it's created a new place for Chicago. So it has a big roof to protect it from snow. When the snow melts, it comes down inside the columns. But when you're dealing with an atmosphere like this, you heat and cool people internally. So it does get hot in the summer. You don't try and heat the space, and again, the people can. So to just close this little section, this is what we're all about. You know, when we design schools, we always start with a diagram where there's a heart in the middle, or the Smithsonian Institute, the Imperial War Museum in London. It's great in the kind of places. People like to be in the edges, they like to be able to look down, you know, the simple things in life. View Hong Kong. People like to sit on buildings. That's in Nîmes. You know, when you're a tourist and you walk a long way, you love to find places to sit, where you won't be charged a huge amount of money for a coffee. You'll be sitting down. Okay, next subject, green infrastructure. You know, the more, when I was thinking about this lecture, the more I realised how often greenery plays an important part in our work. This happens to be a house in Singapore. And sometimes we do huge concept master plans like this. This is Red to Dead. It's using free energies to pump water up to the Dead Sea, comes back down, and the idea is we could convert the salt water back into water to feed landscape. And so that's dealing with 4 different governments on a truly global scale. But other times it's just these tiny little pocket spaces. You know, nowadays you can grow vertical green walls successfully. So that's a little gift to San Francisco. This is a little office reception in Copenhagen. And trees, that we've found ways to grow trees internally, you know, with hydroponics and so on. But these are the kind of places that people want to be now. You know, they want to have little places to talk on their phone, to gather together. And, you know, the materials here are recycled rubber, recycled timber, and all these kind of things. Greenery. This is in Malaysia. This is a university in Malaysia. And I showed just one drawing. I spend every day of my life drawing. This one isn't by me. It's a friend of mine called Tom Policevic, who sadly is no longer with us. And this was a concept drawing. You know, nowadays, computers, when you use computers, are scaleless. And when people draw, they don't draw trees the real size. You know, I always say to our office, look out at Battersea Park. You know, trees can be 10 stories high, you know, much taller than that. But Tom's drawing captured this beautifully, the idea of very, very simple buildings under an enormous canopy. And the enormous canopy was there to give the university some status, and, you know, but primarily there is sunshades, and the water would be regathered, and the landscape would come. So eventually in that central space, you know, you wouldn't be able to see from one side to the other. It's architecture and landscape hand in hand. This one could almost be a quiz question. You know, what kind of building is this? Is it an office building? Is it a library? Why would you put a public space outside an opera house? There's an opera house in Dallas. And Dallas is a city, as you may know, that is all to do with the car. And there's no place to stop and chill out. And so this is our little gift to Dallas, a shaded, quiet space. I remember when we were working on the Kai Tak ferry terminal, so this is in Hong Kong, we had conversations with the client about when is a ferry terminal not a ferry terminal, and that's when there's no ferries there. So for many months in the year, there are no ferries because of the cyclones. And they want retail in this building. So we said, well, you need to create something until the city arrives. You need to create something. And so we argued that they should have a roof garden on the top, because the views from this building are incredible. And the roof garden was built. You know, getting people on top of buildings is an amazing thing. Often air conditioning gets the best view of a city. But it's just great for, you know, Hong Kong, if you know Hong Kong, is very dense, it's very hot. It's so lovely that, you know, my grandson went there in 30 years' time, these trees would be big and it would be a shady place. Here's the same kind of idea in London. This is a Crossrail station. We were asked to design a retail element that goes on top of the station. And then the same kind of idea. At Canary Wharf, there's no there. You know, there's no place to go and sit quietly amongst trees. It's incredibly dense. And we managed again. And now the railway line isn't even working yet, but people are going to sit in this space and the retailers are happy. And it's just lovely. For the last few years, I've been working on this project. This is Battersea Power Station. This is a huge development in London. And you know, here in Katowice, you have a lot of industrial buildings that have lost their uses. So this is our version. The Battersea Power Station, this site lay dormant for about 20 years. So there's a big development that goes on all around it. We're creating this new high street with the amazing American architect Frank Gehry. And this is the new high street. So our building is on the left and Frank's is on the right. And this is what it's going to be like. So you come out of a new underground station here. There's loads and loads of shops. When you shop, you kind of swim like that. So you kind of come along like that. I call this bit Selfie Square, because that's where you're going to take the photographs of the building, yeah? And this is big scale, big scale. You know, this is London. London's getting bigger all the time. So it's big scale development. So what do you give back? London's biggest roof garden. And on the roof garden now we have a pool, we have hotel cabanas, we have summer kitchens, picnic lawns, we have hammock rooms, we have kids' play areas, yoga decks. But it makes a contribution back to the city as a green roof. On the subject of roofs, I can't think of a better project than this one. This, of course, is the Reichstag, the German Parliament. And Norman's idea was to try and get people up onto the roof. And if you've been there, it's an extraordinary experience. And so you can spiral up and you can come back down. But from here, you can look right down into the Parliament. You can see the people that you've elected. So it's about a democratic Germany. It's about openness of government. And again, the people came, you know, up to 30,000 a day. And I can't speak German, but I think that says for the German people, something like that. But these are the people of the world. You know, we're all global travellers now. And must be a happy place, right? But, you know, imagine that. Imagine saying, I'd like to put tens of thousands of people on the roof of your Parliament building. You know, imagine that. You know, the security issues to start with. But it happened because it was such a great idea. And the way that we deal with historic buildings is that we peel away the layers of history, and then whenever we insert new things, it's almost like you can take the building, turn it upside down and shake it, and then it drops out. And this whole dome is a structure that sheds light down into the debating chamber, but on certain occasions it can give light back to the city. So I've been talking about getting people on the roof of buildings and having gardens, and this is one we're doing in San Francisco. You can tell it's in San Francisco because it's a building that has biceps. You know, it has strength because it's in an earthquake zone. But not only does this building have a great garden on the top, the gift to San Francisco is an amazing space at the bottom. So there's no 6 floors at the bottom to create this. This is in the central business district in San Francisco, and it's arguably the coolest city in the world to hang out. So when you go to work, you can stop amidst the trees and have a smoothie or something. And it's just a lovely little gift. It's a lovely little moment in the city. And just to finish this little bit on green infrastructure, I'm going to talk about Apple Park very briefly. This bit on the left, this is almost a typical piece of many bits of America. Building car park, building car park, building car park, building car park. It's a bit soulless. And so the story goes that Steve Jobs phoned Norman and said, I need your help. And he wanted to create a building, Apple Park, a building in a park so that people could enjoy the landscape that he grew up in. So now you park at the edge and you walk through the park on your way to work. And down on the bottom right-hand corner, there's a little circle. That's the Steve Jobs Theatre. It's an amazing building, surrounded by landscape. It'll become even more interesting when the landscape matures and it really sits in the park. And we often do images to try and illustrate trees at 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, because trees change over time. Okay, I'm going to do one more section and then we're going to take a little time out and we're going to have a coffee or something. And if you want to, I hope you do, you can come back after your tea. I'm going to talk about how we move around the planet now very briefly. And as I said, I started in the office on the 1st of May 1996 and I wanted to design towers and stadium and things. My first project was amazing. It was to help the pedestrianisation of central London by taking out traffic on the north side of Trafalgar Square. In the end, our contribution was to make a grand flight of stairs. We made 2 little holes in the wall, so there's some public toilets and there's a cafe. And 20 years on, who knows that Foster & Partners did this project? Maybe none of you. But it matters. It matters because we left the city better than we found it. And it was the start of the congestion charge in London. It was the start of London being a walking city and given the space back. And I can see a direct link between this project and the one I showed you earlier in Marseille. And it's all forgotten now, but the only people who, well, you can see here, yellow are Londoners, red are tourists. And all the tourists were here because they were feeding pigeons. So Trafalgar Square didn't have people in it, really, other than people who wanted, no Londoners, and this arguably is our main space. You can see people walking around the edges. And part of the reason is it was very dangerous. People were crossing from here to here. It was all before you had your iPhones, you had maps and you had cameras, and you were trying to go down to House of Parliament or to Buckingham Palace, and this was a real accident black spot. And we changed it to be this big circular thing. We slow all the traffic down, and arguably we've saved lives. It's important. It's very, very important. Because the people were treated like cattle. It was the same thing in Marseille. They weren't important. The cars were important, but the people weren't. They're all fenced in, and then they run at the last minute. But if you slow traffic down and you create decent islands in the middle, then people can cross at a pace like that. People first. People, 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 people. It's all about people, 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 people. Not about square feet and square meters. Cyclists were the enemy. We live in a different world now. And it's all about public consultation, these projects, how we went from 8 to 42 to the final master plan, reaching out to people. We did simple little things. We got rid of traffic in front of Buckingham Palace, and now people love to gather. Nobody knows now, but we got rid of all the cars. These were all civil servants' cars. We got rid of all of these, and we gave horse guards a bit of dignity again. Small little victories, small things, very small things. Changing it. And then, getting rid of this kind of thing and replacing it with that kind of thing. It's the same thing, if you have seats on the edge of buildings, if you have a big flight of steps that faces the sun, people will enjoy being there. And it's also, if you get street theatre, then you know you've won. And we had a conversation once with Westminster District Council, and they said, we want to do something to celebrate people coming into Trafalgar Square. So we spoke about making it a beach. We thought it would be good fun for a beach to be in the middle of London. And they wouldn't allow that because all the sand would go down out the drains. So we said, okay, let's make it a park. It was a good idea at the time. Wettest summer ever in London. It didn't last very long. But anyway, for a little while, the people came and they had picnics in Trafalgar Square. That's where pigeons used to be. That was one of the first things I worked in the office. Again, I'm going to say what was said at the beginning. I can sometimes talk about things that I worked on, but the Millennium Bridge was so many people, wonderful engineers, Jack Zuns and Roger Athel-Smith and Chris Wise and all sorts of amazing engineers, and Tony Carroll, the sculptor, and loads of people who built it. And I love the bridge. The Tate Modern is again, Katowice, what do you do with your existing buildings? So the Tate Modern, converted by Herzog and de Meuron, is now the most visited cultural building in England. It's more than the British Museum now. And it's wonderful. And this connection kind of helps. It goes direct from St Paul's Cathedral to the Tate Modern, but all credit to Nick Sirota and the people who did the Tate Modern. It's magic. And the whole idea of floating above the city, when we designed this, the bridge has a balustrade that's like that because it's the only time you cross the Thames without the noise of cars or trains. And it was at the time of Titanic, when Kate Winslet was on the end of the boat. So it's designed to make people stop and enjoy the city, like you're on the deck of a cruise liner. And we designed the balustrade to be difficult to climb, and we also designed this little seat at the bottom. And after that we did this one. This is the highest bridge in the world at the time, the Mille Viaduct. And the balustrade here is completely different because on a big bridge like this, you have to design something that doesn't put big wind loads into the bridge. You want to see the view and you want to take some energy. So there are these beautiful little curved planks, and another story for another time. Recently we were asked by Nissan, what would Foster & Partners do if you designed a fuel station of the future? And they thought we would design a big kind of canopy or something. We didn't, we designed a curb. So the whole idea here is that London is a power station that can charge cars and you connect to the curbs. And so when you're in your bed at night, quite soon, cars will be going around, they'll be driving themselves around and they'll be looking for charging. If they've been on long journeys, they can offer charge back into the buildings. With residential, you have a peak demand in the morning and the evening. With offices, it's midday, so you can balance everything. And everything is hooked up. And as I said before, the cars will be so clean that you can open windows, and they might even come into the buildings that you're in because they're now clean vehicles. You can hire a 2-person, 4-person, 6-person car when you really need one. And Norman, in particular, has been talking about ideas like this for, 1967 he founded the company. For the last 50-odd years, Norman's been talking about these subjects, car share and metro and getting people moving in different ways. But it's all really happening now. And finally, in this section, how do we move goods around the world? So this is a little film about goods, transportation, and as Steve did for Dubai ports.
Tomorrow, it will be expected. The global growth of e-commerce is driving a consumer behaviour shift where goods and services are delivered rapidly, immediately. DP World sees the need for an advanced new network to support this future. Throughout history, cargo has always been the catalyst of transport revolutions. Today, DP World has partnered with Virgin Hyperloop One to realise the next leap in transport and make Hyperloop a reality. Pushing the boundaries of innovation, having the courage to do something different. The new cutting-edge linear electric motor propels the pod magnetically through the interportal, sills of pumps remove nearly all the air inside the tube to allow for an energy-efficient, quiet, and incredibly fast journey. Our future ports will integrate Hyperloop technology for synchronized, seamless, intelligent movement of cargo. On demand, direct, autonomous. Hyperloop can deliver exceptional service for high-priority, on-demand goods at the cost of trucking and the speed of flight. Sustainable operations powered by renewable energy. Utilizing network capacity for both freight and passengers. Goods are seamlessly transferred to autonomous vehicles while passengers are taken to the heart of the city. Rapid, effortless deliveries and the freedom from having to plan too far ahead. Efficient supply chains that unlock greater capacity for growth. It's what the world demands. Introducing DP World Cargo Speed.
Okay, so I've spoken for about 35 minutes, something like that. And the idea now is to have a little break and we can go and have a cup of tea together. And I'm very happy because you've all come back, so that's nice. Welcome back. And what I'd like to do now is I'd like to, interestingly, we had a lot of questions on Instagram. So there were questions like, how do you marry up architecture and engineering in the practice and things? And I think they're very good questions. So I want to try and illustrate in this second half how, in our mind, everything's interconnected. So we have 1,400 people in our organization in 20 offices. And we have architects, engineers, landscape architects. And sometimes the research of our structural engineers and our mechanical engineers can influence the design of a table, or we're all, in that sense, I think our office is a little bit like a university, and it's all connected up. So I'm going to try and make a connection between space and some projects that we've done in space, and lessons that we've learned from space, and how it comes into the work of our office. So I'm going to talk, this is a lecture in 2 halves. So this is a spaceport designed for Richard Branson and Virgin Galactic. And this was our first project that was to do with space. And so earlier this year, there was successful test flights for the aircraft. So this is in the desert in America. And that was our first venture into space and the idea of space. And then from that, we entered a competition with the European Space Agency. What would happen if we built on the moon? So our idea was to send these capsules to the moon, and then we'd have these inflatable structures, and then we'd send 3D printers to the moon, and they would print with moon dust, and they would create solid shells. And from that, we really advanced our thinking in 3D printing, and that's influencing a lot of the next things that we do. And then after that, we were asked to think about what would happen if you went to Mars. So it takes you 3 days to go to the moon. It takes you 7 months to go to Mars. So if you went to Mars for 7 months and you were on a 6-month mission to Mars, 7 months there, 6 months on Mars, 7 months back, that's 2 years of your life. So as a human being, you know, that's a long journey. 2 years of your life is a long time to be away from home. And so we started to think about what would a space be like for an astronaut in the future. And we sort of concluded that the things you see on the screen there are the kind of things that people like. They like colour, they like texture, cozy, warm interiors, growing plants, pets, pictures from home. So this started a whole new area of research, an area of research of, all that's going on in the office. So we have a rocket scientist, we have neurologists and so on. And they're all thinking about the future. And this is about the architecture of the senses. And your senses, you know, you have 5 senses. The things you see, the things you hear, the things you touch, the things you taste. And nowadays, everything is sort of changing quickly. So retail is changing quickly. So, you know, one of our Apple stores here in California has been used for a rock concert. Here in London, it's been used for a lecture. This is my friend Narendra Siggu, one of the other senior partners, giving a lecture. And retail is changing very, very fast. This is Smithfield's in London. And this is what it was like. And then the client asked us to come along and think of new ways that we could adapt the space. You know, we talk a lot about pop-up retail. So we've designed these new kiosks. They all fold away, they're very simple. And they're really nice. Taste is your most minuscule of your senses. And Norman's recently been designing these beautiful new vessels to taste things. And you know, the observation that nowadays with a cup, lots of people drink tea, so the cup is quite hot. And so there's a cup within a cup, which will stop you getting your hand too warm. Sound. This is another Apple store. This one's in Milan. And I think it's very, very beautiful. You know, obviously here I could talk about colour, texture, water, reflectivity, some of the things I was talking about before. But, you know, the sense of sound of a waterfall in an Italian square is a very, very lovely idea. And sight. Norman's been designing this beautiful pavilion in Switzerland. And I think it's absolutely majestic. The colour of it, the texture of it, and the light at night is so beautiful. Touch. This is a museum that we've been designing in Narbonne in the south of France. And when we started thinking about it, it's a museum of Roman antiquities. And the idea was that we wanted to kind of dig into the ground and pull out of the ground the materials that the Romans used. And so we have sandstone and limestone in the walls, so we're making these new concrete walls with the materials that the Romans used to use. And this is just a few shots of this new building. The idea that kids would come along and touch the building, you know, there'd be some connection to the Romans. This is a beautiful university that we've designed in China. And what's interesting here was the team found a lovely local firm that was making these beautiful, beautiful bricks. And so this is a real celebration of local traditions in brick making. They have these lovely proportions and colours and textures. What's nice, you know, what I'm talking about all the time is human connections. And in China, there's a great tradition at the end of a project that, you know, they hand over a business card or they hand over a present. It might be a bottle of wine or something, yum. And in this case, the team were handed a brick. And it's such a lovely connection, you know, the idea of the architects of our office coming back to London with a brick. You know, he's a 58-year-old guy getting excited about bricks, you know. But it's lovely because, you know, it's from China, it's built with local craftsmen, and it's all these connections that I've been talking about. This is a lovely project that Norman did in Manchester. This is a Maggie Centre in Manchester, and I love this little building. It's it has scale, it has humanity, it has texture. There's a clear expression of the structure. There's a lot of timber, and you go to this building if you've been diagnosed with cancer and you need support. And I think it's so lovely because you come into a reception area, you might be feeling a bit worried, so you can go somewhere private. Or you can come and have a cup of tea, or you can come and sit in the lounge. The landscape comes right into the building. My mum has had cancer 4 times, she's now 92. And when somebody has cancer, every season is like a victory. You know, Christmases become important, but you know, we're now in springtime, so the spring flowers. And so, you know, what I love about this building is that you see the colours, you see the changing seasons. You know, there's lots of glass and, you know, bricks and timber. There's warmth in the winter. You can smell a fire. I love it. So it's a lovely little project. And then finally, this is the last thing I'm going to show. There was recently a presentation in the office of this lovely little art gallery in Florida that we've just completed. And what I wanted to talk about here was I just wanted to return to the subject of landscape, because we have landscape architects in the office. And I think that I'm back to my theme of how, when we design, we have to think about the space between buildings, and in this case, the space between things. You know, when you're in Florida, there is real heat, there is humidity, so you need places of shade. And the way that the designers in our office have created this, it's very, very beautiful. You know, frameworks for the different artworks, understanding, you know, how these Anthony Gormley sculptures would sit in the garden, how they'd be framed. It's beautiful. It's like a set piece. You know, understanding the scale of trees, and as I said, you know, here they're drawn at 20 feet to 40 feet, but over time, how they will mature. And if you get it right, you know, that's what happens. You know, we have an aging population, people need to sit down. And our interior designers designed a beautiful bench. It's the simple things in life, you know? It's the simple things that can make a difference. And I kind of closed my lecture kind of where I began. You know, I spoke at the beginning about my grandson. One of the questions online in the interval was, are you afraid of the future? No, I'm not afraid of the future. I believe in humanity, and obviously we live in difficult times and we could talk about it. But I think that there's a lot of students in the office. There's a lot of students in the audience, a lot of students. A lot of the questions earlier were about what advice would I give and what inspired me when I was young and all of these kind of things, yeah? And I think that you have to immerse yourself in the world. You have to draw inspiration from everywhere, in car design, in fashion, in music, because I'm trying to illustrate that architecture is not something that you can experience on the internet. You know, when I was studying when I was in my mid-20s, my early 20s. You know, you go to the library and you'd see magazines. When you see architectural magazines, everything you look at is already history, even if it's a brand new building. And if you want to be a truly inventive architect and do something that the world has never seen before, you have to draw inspiration from many, many different places. It can be from poetry, it can be from looking at the stars, whatever it is. That's my advice. You have to travel. You have to. We went today, Robert, the architect, what's his second name? Can you remember? Garnetsky. Is that okay? You know who he is? Yeah. Great guy, great office. And he has this little residential building that we saw. And it's very, very beautiful because it only has 3 ideas. It has an idea at the base that is stainless steel. And it's stainless steel because there's a lot of graffiti in the street around and it can be easily cleaned. And it's about reflections as well. And then, because I also had questions about what's your first impressions of Katowice. And one of them was how dirty some of the buildings are. And I think that comes from the industrial heritage here and coal and so on, and maybe. And so Robert's response to that was to make a dark building. And so he only has wall in one colour, but also the balconies are dark as well, in the same material. And they're a kind of dark grey colour. But at the moment, I'm doing life drawing. And when you do life drawing and you look at somebody's face, and I'm looking at your face just now, I can see light reflecting from the bottom up there, so I can see light on the underside of your cheeks. And I can see darker colours here, and they're sort of orange before you get to colour. And I can probably read about 15 different colours of your face. I could pick anybody's face. The interesting thing about seeing that building today, which is completely dark grey, and you should go and see it, is that I could see in it about 12 different tones of the base colour. Because on the side that was being reflected, or the sun was hitting, it was different on each of the different balconies and the underside, because they were often playing with the light that's from below. And it's the difference between the camera and painting. And I think that for young architects, you have to draw. You have to make models. When you draw, you make mistakes. When you make mistakes, you learn. You know, just working on a computer is a very linear process. And in our office, we build models of everything. You know, the physical act of building models. If it's difficult to draw, it's difficult to model. If it's difficult to model, it's very difficult to build. And so somehow or another, you have to get out of the computer and you have to get your hands mucky. I started my career as an architectural technician. I wanted to learn how to build before I went to architecture school. So I was on freezing cold building sites in Scotland when I was 17. And to pick up a brick and understand the weight of a brick and then how heavy a building is going to be. That's my advice. So anyway, obviously I have these pictures in because I've just become a grandfather. But the joy of these kids is just magic. You know, also I loved the presentation by Michael Wurzel in our office and the rest of the team about the kind of furniture that we've designed. You know, they've designed these beautiful tables, and we have one in our office, and the table gently slopes, and the edge, and you know, the edge of this table is very tactile, you know. It's soft, and it's curved, and you see people in the office actually touching it, you know, the architecture of the senses. Oh, it's lovely. You know, we have an aging population, and the fact that these two wonderful ladies are going to play chess in an art museum and then hopefully enjoy sitting at a table that we've designed. Yeah. That's a nice feeling. And I think a lot of architects do photographs that don't have people in. I don't really understand that. And Because I'm back to my, am I afraid of the future? How can I be? When people are still happy enough to play and have fun and all of that, There's still a lot of fun in the world, a lot of fun to be had. And so, I've spoken, my last 2 slides, so I've spoken about many things tonight. These are some of the buildings that we've done. And I want to say it one last time, I'm very proud to represent our office. I'm humbled to be asked here to talk to you all tonight. This is our main studio in London. Altogether, we're 1,400 people. We speak 45 different languages. We speak 65 nationalities. And you can see there, we have 26 Polish staff. So arguably it's not enough. They're all amazing. We have wonderful people in our studio. Christoph, Jedrich, Joanna, Anna Zuzula, who I think is the happiest person in the world. She never stops smiling. And so we have great Polish people in the office. And it's a great place to be. Obviously I love it. I hope you can tell I love it. So there we go. That's the end of my talk, and I'm happy to take some questions, and I hope you've enjoyed it. Thank you.
Jeszcze raz dziękujemy za tak liczne pytania. Myślę, że będzie jeszcze szansa i że każdy z Was będzie mógł je zadać. Natomiast mistrzowi podobały się najbardziej 2. Pierwsze z nich, Andy, what kind of music do you like and how it affects on your design process?
Who is the author of the question?
The author, Anderowicz.
Osoba o pseudonimie Anderowicz.
I thought it was a great question. I love
Zapraszamy pod nagrody. And before we answer the questions, I think that you can give your signature.
I will. I promise. I thought it was a great question. All my life, I said before, I get inspired by music. So, as strange as it may seem, from a guy who comes from Scotland and has a bald head, I never had dreadlocks, but I've always loved reggae music. So, when I'm drawing, this is what I'm listening to. It's called The Sun by Burmese Beer. You'll sing now. So that's my answer.
Thank you.
I said I recognise I'm getting filmed, so I'm not going too bad. But I love that music. I love it because it's happy and it's inspirational, and that's who I am. Yeah.
Okay, and another question.
Okay, wait for a minute. Now, could you please give the signature? Raz jeszcze duże gratulacje.
I said keep loving reggae music because it's so joyful. Which answers the other one that somebody said, am I afraid of the future? Never when I'm listening to reggae, that's for sure.
Okay, the next question, Maya. Do you want your grandson to follow your steps and become an architect as well?
Zapraszamy autorkę pytania na scenę.
Okay, that's a brilliant question. So, my son, Michael, he was asked, when he was 12, he was asked at school, do you want to be an architect like your dad? And my son, when he was 12, said, no, it takes far too long to study and you don't earn enough money. And I thought, what a good answer. So he's a very successful graphic designer. So what I tried to do with my kids was, I tried to give them, almost like I've described to you, I tried to give my two kids the broadest possible interests. So my wife would work on a Saturday, and I'd take my daughter to motor racing or the football, and we do everything. We do ballet, we do opera, and go to galleries and try and give them the broadest possible interest, because all I hoped for my kids is the same I hope for my grandson, that they find something that they love. And so my son's a great graphic designer, and my daughter is a gorilla keeper. So she studied zoology, and she looks after gorillas, and I could talk for the next 20 minutes about gorillas and how much she loves gorillas. And my grandson has a zoo-themed nursery, and so she has a great love of animals. And so all I hope for my grandson is that he does something that he truly loves, you know? That's all. Well, I don't know what else to say. But.
Once again, many congratulations.
Dominica asked a really good question, and you're not an architect, yeah? You said you're not an architect. And she said, I don't want to say this to the whole audience, but I thought it was such a good question that I thought it would. You know, the question was about, do you think it's possible to slide? That's right. You know, is it possible to slide? So we started off having a serious conversation about, you know, sliding around a city, what it meant on gentle slopes. And I was talking about all the obvious things, about how you have slopes and landings, because if somebody's in a wheelchair, they have to rest and so on, yeah? But then we started to talk about how maybe technology can really help. Maybe there could be, you know, now we have so many ways to move around the city. Maybe there are shoes that when you wanted to go forward, they could slide, and if you do, I mean, fun enough with this carpet here. Seriously, that's amazing. See, if I do it that way, I can slide. If I do it that way, across the green. There's your answer, it's the carpet. And so I said two other things, yeah? I said, my dad couldn't speak. He had a stroke eventually. And all he could say was, Anna. He could speak. And so that made me think that this phone records my voice every single day, my voice. And I thought, wouldn't it be amazing if somebody lost the power of speech? It could speak in my dad's voice. And I want to try and do that. I think that's a great thing. I spoke about how, because my mum is 92, and my father-in-law passed away last year, and I'm at that kind of age now, and people who are in their 80s and 90s worry about falling and breaking their hips. And I was thinking about doing a lot of work on designing for people who are older now, And I thought about bicycle helmets when you crash and the material becomes softer to protect your brain. And so I have this idea, it would be great to have a floor that if somebody fell, the floor might go soft and they might not break their hip. And I think that my point is that no idea is ever stupid. It might only be the person that you talked about the idea. It's never, you must never be afraid to put your hand up and say, what if? If it can make a difference, then it's a great thing to do. So I hope you don't mind. You said I don't want to talk about it to the audience, but because I thought it was such a good question. So.
Okay, thank you very much. Unfortunately, we don't have any more prizes, but you can still ask a question to our Master of Architecture. So it's your time. Is there anybody who has a question?
Thank you very much for the lecture. It was very inspiring. I'm going to ask a question. I heard myself a lot of times, and having worked in some offices, I heard this question many times from my colleagues. People wonder how far does Norman Foster get influenced in each of the projects. Obviously there is 1,400 staff at the office, and there must be a lot of projects. Does Norman Foster know each one of them, and how far does he get influenced in the process of designing?
He knows everything that's going on in the office, yeah? And he travels extensively. You only have to look at his Instagram account to see how he travels, yeah? And then what happens is there are certain projects that Norman gets very involved in. So Apple Park was one, working closely with Steve Jobs, Bloomberg in London, with Michael Bloomberg, and more recently the Comcast Tower, and each of them are very different. And so that's the answer to the question. Is Norman still active in the practice? 100% and more. And he knows everything that goes on. But the answer is that there are certain projects that Norman gets incredibly involved in. And I think when he does, he just raises the bar for all of us in the practice. I named just 3, of course I could mention many more, yeah? So that's my answer, He knows what's going on in the office, and he's an amazing person. He's truly inspirational. That's my answer.
Hiya. If you wouldn't be architect, what you would do in life? I think you would be a musician.
Sorry?
I think you would be a musician.
A musician?
You're very charismatic.
Charismatic, that's nice. I'm a big guy, I have very short fingers. So when I tried to play the piano, I didn't have enough reach, and nor could I play the guitar for the same reason, yeah? So music was sort of ruled out. But I think like I said before, I think that had I not found architecture, I'd like to think that I would have found something that was creative, I think. Because you can see it's in my bones, and I love connecting with people, and I love inspiring the next generation. I teach, I teach in various places, so maybe I would have been a teacher, like a full-time teacher in some way. I would never have been a footballer, so maybe a football manager. It's a good question.
You're kitty pie.
The what?
You're kitty pie.
Oh, there you go.
Okay, thank
It's
you
official.
very
Thank you.
much. I think that we have time for one more question. Is it okay for you, Andy?
Sure.
So, is there someone who would like to ask a question to our guest lecturer?
My question would be, you taught us a lot about the success, about the happiness, but how does the office cope with failures? And it always happen to not successfully, sometimes not get fully satisfied with the result. So what is the reaction inside? How does the office cope with this kind of situation?
Is the question about success and failure? Is it
Yeah, success and failure.
failure?
Yes.
Like winning competitions and not winning competitions?
I mean about the buildings you design and like.
I'm only asking what to answer the question properly. So you're asking about how we deal with success and.
I mean with the failure,
and
because
failure.
about the success, I know.
Okay, that's okay. So is that really your question? That's what you like.
Yeah, that's what I want to know. What it looks
Okay,
like inside.
it's fine. It's fine. Yeah. So for every some people often ask. There were questions about who's your idol, who's your favorite architect, and all of that. In many ways, we don't criticize other architects because to build is very difficult. So many things have to happen. A great client, planning consent, getting it on budget, building anything can be judged as a success as an architect, I think. And projects don't go forward for many, many different reasons. One of the reasons I think why there aren't more 600, 800 meter high towers in the world is they probably have to ride through 2 recessions, not 1. They take a long time to build, so you might design something that's very tall, but the project fails because the time scale is so long and the world changes. But the question is success and failure, and I think that a lot of what we have to do as architects is compete. And as a practice, sometimes we're competing against some of the best architects in the world. And we don't always win. And we like to think that we win more than we lose. I don't know the answer, but that's what we like to think. And if we lose a competition to somebody, the first thing you do is you write to the other person and you congratulate them, because, that is the way it should be. And if somebody wins a competition, that's life. And in the office, if we win, we go, we drink, we celebrate. If we lose, we go, we drink, we celebrate what we've achieved. Because in competitions, I think what we always try and do is we always try and learn, push the boundaries, experiment, and then you learn something. And having been in the office nearly 25 years, it's like a cycle, You can see ideas coming back. And in that sense, I think it's a bit like being a musician. It's maybe you started something over there and then it becomes a different piece, or an artist and it becomes a different painting. And I don't think anything's ever lost. If you do a competition, some of the big airport competitions, Norman asked recently, we did an airport competition, we said, how many people in this office worked on this? Project manager, legal, contract, video makers, model makers, musicians, and the architects, there was over 100. And all of those 100 people learned something from doing that. So the next time that we had a big airport competition, on we go. So there's never failure, really. You win, you lose, but architecture, if you're lucky enough to live long, is a lifelong profession. If you're a footballer, you might have a career for 10 years. 5 years, you get injured, and you're very young when you succeed in how you handle it. But an architect can have a profession that is 60 years maybe, something like that. I'm in my 41st year. I hope I've got more to offer. I hope I do. And so, it's a lifelong journey, and things come back to you, Therefore, it's not, failure isn't an option, You can't. When you do competitions, there are lots of reasons why you don't win, actually. Sometimes it's a developer bid and there wasn't enough money to bid or something, But always think about success. We have to end our evening on happy thoughts, grandchildren, and it's going to be a very in Poland tomorrow and all of that kind of thing. Okay.
Okay, once again, many thanks to all of you for participating in the Masters of Architecture series. Also, big thank you to you, Andy. we would like to give you a special gift in the end to thank you for making time to come to Katowice to speak for us about your amazing work. I think it was the longest applause in the history of the pastors of architecture series. So thank you very much.